Mr. Co-Chair, yes, I'm all for that. I'm very excited about this program and eager to hear our update. So, Mr. Conklin and Dr. Orlin, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Is technology ready? Should ask.
Yes, thank you. I did not want to interrupt, but we are ready to do the countdown whenever now is the right time.
Count us down.
All right, we are live in 5.
Mr. Co-Chair, yes.
Sorry.
Goes in the machine.
I was like, wait. We are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Should ask. Who is that? Okay. Maybe it's resolved. Welcome to a joint committee meeting of the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee and the Transportation, Energy, Infrastructure, and Environment Committee. We are taking up the Open Streets program, something that we're all very enthusiastic about. We're getting an update. And I'll pass it to my co-chair.
Thank you, Chairman Reamer. I want to thank DOT, State Highway Administration, and the Parks Department for their the presentation we're about to receive and their great work on the Open Streets program. This pandemic has been a huge challenge for all of us, and I think one of the silver linings to come out of this unexpected disaster is the Open Streets program, and it has shown something I mentioned last Tuesday, that government can make quick changes when it wants to. I think under normal times we might have set up a commission to look into this and bring in lots of stakeholders, and this time we moved very expeditiously in response to lots of constituent requests. And overall, I think it's had some hiccups, but been a great effort that reflects hard work from people in a lot of different agencies. So we're eager to hear the update today, and I'm really glad we're calling this joint committee hearing.
And let me, before we begin, ask Councilmember Glass. He requested this joint meeting, which we appreciate, and he'd like to maybe share a comment.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Chairs Reamer and Hucker, for holding this conversation, for everybody else for being here. And the reason I requested this meeting is because over the last 9 months, we've all been hearing from constituents who have advocated for safe places to go outside. When they wanted to get off the computer, get out of their house, this type of program has allowed them to engage in some physical and mental exercise. And I think the feedback that we've all received has been tremendous. And I just really also want to thank DOT, Parks, SHA for making Open Streets a reality over the last 9 months. But then, the last people I just want to thank for this program, quite frankly, are the advocates who have pushed for Open Streets early on during this pandemic as the county figured out a response for it. Outdoor space for recreation and dining has given so many in our community and business owners safe venues to get outside of their homes and to make some money, which we all know is really important. And so as we head into the winter, I look forward to this conversation to see how the program progresses. And really just want to extend my appreciation to everybody who's made it possible over the last 9 months.
Very good. Thank you so much. Good point to thank our community advocates and organizers. We heard from them when we met as a joint committee earlier in the year, and they have done incredible work. Thinking especially of Allison Gillespie and Christy Daphnis and some others. But there's been contributions from council staff and community, and MCDOT has done a terrific job, and SHA is part of the mix. Our small businesses, it's been fundamentally part of both reclaiming the streets for a better use while they're underused, frankly, and also supporting recovery. So, Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just echoing what has already been said. First of all, what the council president said, this has been the best example, I think, during COVID, where government has started with getting to yes and figuring out how to get there, as opposed to starting with no and figuring out why we can't do it. And we should be bottling this up and figuring it out in every aspect of county operations. It proves that, in fact, government can be nimble, as Council President Hucker has said, and this proves it. And it is possible for a half dozen different government agencies to change the way that they do things and do it relatively quickly. It is possible to listen to community advocates and hear what the community wants and actually deliver for them. And we can repurpose what we have always thought was the way things are and the way things will be. And this represents all of that. It's a reflection that streets are for people, a changing mindset of what our public infrastructure is and what it can be and how we can best utilize it in the best interests of our residents. And I think it's a reflection of the changing nature of the type of county and community we are and what the community increasingly wants, which is safe, accessible places to enjoy the benefits of our community, not necessarily just going from point A to point B, but how you get from point A to point B. And the infrastructure in between point A and point B is just as important as the places that it's connecting. And so it's really exciting to see how the Streetery in Bethesda has been replicated across the county, how Parks led the way with their parkways, the 3 parkways originally, and how MCDOT has taken on that effort and implemented theirs as well, and how the community through MCDOT has been able to figure out ways in smaller ad hoc opportunities to provide these in different neighborhoods, which I think is a really great model. So just really pleased, really excited for this conversation, appreciate everybody's efforts to make this happen. And I think it just shows that we can work together, we can collaborate, and we can actually make things happen in government and deliver on what county residents want and what, frankly, we're going to need more of if we're going to get through this crisis together.
Thank you. So council members should text me if they want to speak, and participants such as we may just have a dialogue where it's flowing and you can raise your hand, but otherwise, if you are not, please text me and I can make sure you're invited to speak. And see Chair Anderson has joined us. Glenn, would it be the presentations? Tell us what the presentations are so we can know if now's a good time to turn it to DOT and Park and Planning, or should we do that more sequentially?
Yeah, the order we have today is we have DOT going first, and then State Highway Administration, then the Parks Department, and then Christy Daphnis from the Pedestrian Bicycle and Safety Advisory Committee is going to cleanup. And however you want to run it, you would ask questions during the course of each of the 4 presentations, or wait to the end. Your call. But they're all ready to go.
Okay, I'm sure we'll dialogue as we go. Would be my guess, because there'll be distinct issues. So very good. Why don't we begin with MCDOT?
Well, great. I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm joined by a couple colleagues, Hannah Henn, who has led our communications and innovation activities for a while, and as you probably know, is the executive's nominee to fill my old position as the policy deputy that she'll be taking up in January as council. Hannah has been instrumental in this, and we also have Kyle Lucas from our transportation engineering division, who's been involved in a lot of the implementation, particularly along the greenways. I want to say that this was a challenging idea to us. You know, we have a rigid way of doing things, which has its reasons, but we are obviously seeing a totally different set of needs as the pandemic descended upon us in March and April this year. And really, we're able to take a hard look at the situation and say, yes, we do need to find a way to make the streets and space available for people in a different way than they are under normal circumstances. Some of that will translate into forever. Some of that is temporary. The other thing I wanted to say is, you know, we worked early on with the Parks Department, knowing that there was this need, and looked at the county road network and both reached the same conclusion, and that the parkways are the most suited for this use on a regular basis, but our neighborhood streets can play a different role in this, and then our business district and commercial streets have even a different function. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah and Kyle to walk us through kind of what we've learned through this implementation and how and where we're headed.
Hi, good afternoon. Is everybody able to see my screen?
We can't see your screen yet. You need permission. So, Mary?
You have permission. If you press the green share screen button, you should be able to select PowerPoint. Perfect. And then you can go to presenter mode and that'll make it full screen.
That's good. Your audio is garbled still, Hannah.
Try do a testing for us. No.
No, you're
You can
underwater.
call in if you want to sign back in. You can call in on your phone, I think. Sorry, we'll be patient.
And Ms. Hen, I can give you the phone number to call as well if you would like it.
Mary, why don't you do that?
Yeah. So the phone number you would call is 301 Just to say it one more time, 301
Would it be beneficial if SHA went first so that Hannah could have some breathing room to, yes?
We may just want to do that. I thought having, well, anyway, Hannah, we'll let you work on that, and we'll have a SHA go first.
Okay, I will share my screen. Are we good?
Got it.
Yes,
Okay.
you're good.
All right, here we go. Good afternoon, Council President, Transportation and Environment Committee, Planning, Housing and Economic Development Committee, and everyone in attendance. My name is Joseph Mogus. I am a consultant project manager for M.SHA District 30 Traffic. Among my few roles for M.SHA District 3 are the Purple Line Project, the new Shared Streets Initiative, as well as various other special projects within Prince George's County and Montgomery County. It's a pleasure and a privilege to speak before this body. As you all are keenly aware, the current SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 pandemic has created quite a tumultuous and disruptive 2020 calendar year for our lives and livelihood. Among the sectors that were and are deeply impacted by new public safety measures are retail stores, restaurants, and recreational facilities. We were presented with challenges that we had not previously seen before, and happy to report that M.SHA has risen to those challenges, along with our partners in Montgomery County Department of Transportation, Bethesda Urban Partnership, and Silver Spring Urban District. So we have 3 candidate sections to share with the council this afternoon. First, we have US 29 Georgia Avenue from Silver Spring Avenue to Thayer Avenue. Secondly, we have Maryland 594C, Bonifant Street East from US 29 Georgia Avenue to Fenton Street. And lastly, we have a forthcoming new project along Maryland 193 University Boulevard from Amherst Avenue to Arcola Avenue in the Wheaton area. As you can see in this slide, we have a photograph showing northbound US 29 Georgia Avenue from Silver Spring Avenue, looking northerly. You may notice that along with the parking bay, we have also closed the rightmost through lane. You'll also notice various static and dynamic traffic control devices. The construction signing is unrelated to this initiative. That's purple line related. So in June 2020, MDOT-SHA was asked to consider a shared streets program to relieve local businesses operating under COVID restrictions. Councilmember Hucker, you may recall this.
Very well, thank you.
District 3, in coordination with Michael Paler of MCDOT, as well as Humberto Rodriguez and Crystal Ruiz of Silver Spring Urban District, successfully implemented a long-term lane closure permitting outdoor dining along northbound and southbound US 29 Georgia Avenue. As a result of the lane closure, we found a temporary traffic control restriction was necessary, and Kamal Hamoud of MCDOT assisted us, MDOT SHA, by installing U-turn restriction signing on the mast arm, which we greatly appreciated. So, the means of traffic. The means of traffic treatments included a combination of drums and water-filled barrier to accommodate temporary parking bay for carryout. It should be noted that all of these treatments were initially installed at the sole expense of MDOT-SHA District 3, and I'll offer a special thank you to the Assistant District Engineer for Maintenance, Greg Edwards. Silver Spring Urban District was kind enough to later purchase the continuous barrier and install along the static portion of the lane closure. So there was very close communication between myself on behalf of SHA and Silver Spring Urban District. The MOT also includes the southbound US 29 parking bay south of Ripley Street fronting Astrolab Brewing. The northbound US 29 shared streets permit was implemented from June 2020 to November 2020 at the request of the permittee. From a traffic and safety standpoint, we are quite pleased in the successful planning, design, implementation, and demobilization of this initiative. The southbound US 29 parking bay fronting Astrolab Brewing remains closed for their commercial use. It's important to note that on March 15th, 2016, BONIFANT East was transferred from Montgomery County to MDOT-SHA as a result of the road transfer agreement associated with the Purple Line project. The RTA includes Maryland 594B, which is Bonifant Street West, from Ramsey Avenue to George Avenue, and 594A is Bonifant West, or 594B is Bonifant West, 594C is Bonifant East from Georgia to Fenton, and 594A is actually Wayne Avenue from Georgia Avenue to Flower Avenue. So those are the three big ones among some others that were transferred. The last one in Montgomery County is Arliss Street. As you can see in this slide, we have a photograph showing eastbound Maryland 594C Bonifant Street East from the vantage point of US 29 Georgia Avenue looking easterly. You may notice that along with the westbound parking bay closure, we have a discontinuity or a gap to maintain business and shipping access to the alleyway. In July 2020, local business owners asked myself on behalf of MDOT-SHA District 3 to consider a shared streets program in order to sustain their business revenue under the COVID restrictions. MDOT-SHA, in coordination with MCDOT and Silver Spring Urban District, successfully implemented a long-term parking lane closure permitting outdoor dining along westbound Bonifant East from George Avenue to Fenton Street. The MOT treatments included continuous water-filled barrier. Again, this was provided by Silver Spring Urban District. Bonifant East shared streets permit was implemented on July 22nd, 2020, and it's still currently active. This permit will likely be pulled in early 2021 due to forthcoming Purple Line roadway reconstruction, which will be 3 phases. I personally will be informing the business owners of the forthcoming phase construction 1 month in advance, as previously promised, operating in good faith with them so that they can carefully demobilize their equipment and plan accordingly. So this is an exciting development that we have, first of its kind for us. Maryland 193 University Boulevard from Amherst Avenue to Arcola Avenue. This proposed pilot program would close the rightmost lane along both eastbound and westbound 193, and we will repurpose those lanes for bicyclists. The program will allow for bicyclists to have a dedicated lane, whereby allowing pedestrians to effectively reclaim the sidewalk. So bicycles will have their own lane, bicyclists will have their own lane, both eastbound and westbound, and pedestrians will be the sole occupants of the sidewalk. By eliminating 1 of 3 lanes, the program would also have a traffic calming effect, which would lower the speeds and increase the safety for all modes of transportation. The pilot segments will improve bicyclist mobility to and from economic and population centers, as well as connectivity to existing recreational trail networks. We have gone through quite a few iterations to see how to best address the local bicyclists and pedestrians' wants and needs. We've been in close contact with WABA and local residents and elected officials representatives. Final design is pending FHWA funding. We're pursuing FHWA funding, and there are some rubrics and criteria that we need to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's to do some before studies and after studies and see how successful this actually could be. We're targeting a spring 2021 installation date. So we will certainly update everyone on all milestones associated with that. MDOT-SHA will be sending out newsletters to the community along with outreach assistance from MCDOT, which we appreciate, and WABA. Before and after study, as I mentioned, will be conducted for evaluation of safety and effectiveness. Depending upon the success of this pilot program, future candidate sections may be proposed or planning. And I will pass this along.
What do you mean pass it along?
Pass it along.
You mean you're done? Is that what you mean to say?
Yes.
Great. I'm getting an echo. If anyone is called in twice, like via their computer and their phone, try not to do that. Good. Well, let's talk about this one. So this is a terrific proposal. I know Councilmember Hucker had a big role in working with the state on the initial opening. Thought that was really outstanding. The new, closure on University, as you said, it connects recreational trails. So this means the Sligo Creek Trail, will now be. You can ride from Silver Spring to downtown Wheaton using the Sligo Creek Trail. Is that essentially the core of the connection?
I would note that we stop just prior to the triangle at Amherst Avenue. But yes, functionally,
at that point you're kind of into the urban district in Wheaton.
You are there. Yes.
So that's the kind of headline for I think for the community is this proposal will allow a seamless or a lower stress connection between Wheaton downtown and Point South through the Sligo Creek Trail network, which is very interesting. All right. Ooh, here comes that echo again. So, Mr. Hucker.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mogus, for all your work on this. You're right, and I want to highlight Sean Emerson, who's now in Councilmember Glass's office, who did a lot of work on the Georgia Avenue project. The BONIFANT Street project is also really welcome. I've talked to a number of business owners who felt like opening that area really made it possible for them to keep their doors open and made the difference sometimes in whether they had to close their doors or lay off staff. So I think some things we do, we're never quite sure of the impact. This one was actually really clear. in terms of the feedback we got from the community. And I want to thank DOT for their work on Newell Street as well when we get to that. I think this just showed the potential that's out there, and the virus is not going away anytime soon. So while we might have a vaccine, I think this is the type of creative approach, as Councilmember Friedson said, that we need to be looking at about how to repurpose some of our public space for the optimal and most efficient use for the most people. Mr. Chairman.
Great. Councilmember Tawando.
Yeah, I agree. I'm eager to see the, hopefully we can get DOT, and I know Hannah's, not for lack of effort, I know she's tried several times to get on here, but really appreciate it. The SHA presentation, I've partaked in several of these streeteries, and I know that it's been a big boost for businesses. Obviously, as we are on the verge of considering next week shutting down indoor dining, and obviously with the frigid temperatures, all of this, and at the same time, the grant program we're putting in place for winterization and outdoor, hopefully this can be a bridge in addition to some, other support that we need at every level, federal, state, and local for our businesses, particularly our restaurants. But I agree, this has been a very innovative program, and one that I think there are lessons learned and applicability even outside of, when we're not dealing with a pandemic. I think there's, we can turn this around for targeted, festivals and restaurant weeks, and, go down the list. I think there's a lot of opportunity here to do this. And just as we're in the process of trying to make more walkable, bikeable, pedestrian friendly, dining and living and experiences for people. So I think there's a lot here, and I hope that, I guess my question would be to SHA, and then when we get DOT on, are you thinking about it in that way? Have there been other things that you've learned that you think might be applicable in other areas, even outside of the pandemic context? Obviously, we're in the emergency right now, and so I'm thankful, but just wanted to kind of pose that to you all as a general premise.
Well, we do have special event permits for things similar to this. What was unique about this application was it was very long-term and it was somewhat open-ended. So when we began some of these concepts, we didn't have a finite timeline. I recall looking through several emails when we were discussing this with some elected officials, and we were considering when to terminate some of these permits, and we just said perhaps end of October, and then November comes around. So we do have special event permits. That's something that we could certainly do. What was unique about this was the long-term nature of it, the frantic nature of it, because businesses were contacting me for survival, not so much for convenience. And we kind of pulled all our forces and gave it our all. So to answer your question, our forthcoming 193 University Boulevard initiative pretty much answers that question. That's a unique one as well. So we're basically taking the concept that we implemented in Silver Spring, and we're transferring it to other locations for different modalities, in this case, bicyclists.
That's great. I appreciate that. And I guess while I know we have the special event permits, I was thinking more of we have the concept of on the FED, a floating zone, right? This was a floating date of when you could end it. You didn't really know when you were going to end it because of the pandemic, but also that we might just consider, consider those windows of how long we would grant something like this, or, if it's a summer thing where that, you probably would see this be more successful for a longer period of time. Maybe it's something we look at as a way to have our businesses come back even stronger and up their capacity. I'm thinking of next summer, God willing, we have a vaccine and we've reopened. This might be an economic development strategy, right? For an extended period of time, not a special event, but something that could help businesses. And one thing I know, and a little bit of good news before the holidays, if people are going to want to be out, next summer, if we can be safely. And I think I just want to plant the seed now so we can play the tape back and think about it as a not just something we did to get through COVID, but something that might forever alter how we look at economic development and livable, walkable communities, and something that's not just a special event, but it could be part of our way of life when going forward. That's kind of what I want to do. I haven't fully thought it out, but that's what I'm talking about.
I will say seed planted, confirmed. I think retail and restaurant facilities now need to operate under the requirement, or I should say rubric, of outdoor dining capacity to supplement indoor capacity. And,
right.
A lot of these places, like in Georgia Avenue, they just don't have the real estate to just have an outdoor setting unless they get some assistance. And that's where we stepped in. So, we are not closing the door to any improvements for the next seasons or anything like that. We're just reporting on success of our first steps.
And report received. The seed planted, report received. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councilmember Glass has a question. And
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Someone wants.
This is Derek Gunn from SHA District.
Hey, Derek.
Hi, how are you, sir? How are you?
Good.
Just a couple things. One, I just wanted to introduce myself officially. I'm the acting deputy district engineer for District 3. And I do want to say Erica Rigby is our acting district engineer. Actually, she's running into a few challenges, but she should be making the call very shortly. I do want to thank Joe and give him, laud him basically for his efforts that he's really undertaken on our behalf. And one thing that, in response to Councilmember Joando's question, in terms of lessons learned, I think from a state highway standpoint, again, initially it was more in response to economic conditions and business vitality. And it was something that Secretary Slater and Administrator Smith were very passionate about. And District 3's initiatives were to implement it very quickly. So from a lesson learned, I think that we were able to mobilize probably quicker than we thought we could, potentially, and also leverage partnerships that were mentioned a little bit earlier and really working together to make some of this come to fruition. So from the eatery standpoint, I think those two tenets were kind of prominent, and we'll be able to take that back with us and hopefully map that to other efforts. The latter project that Joe mentioned, University Boulevard, that's more of a multimodal. It's more in relation to pedestrians and bicyclists and so forth. So this upcoming effort in the spring, we'll learn a lot from that effort, particularly from a temporal standpoint. Right now, there's not a dedicated cutoff date. We'll implement that and see how we do and how the utility is going and so forth. But we'll learn a lot from that corridor lesson too, and we'll gladly share those findings with the committee once they're available.
Yes, I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Glass here in a second, but thank you for highlighting that the closure on University is really a transportation and community connection closure. It's not really a streetery, obviously. No one's going to be eating on University Boulevard, but it's a really big deal from that perspective. I mean, just as Georgia was a big deal from a, just doing something that had never been done before, but in a streetery context and supporting our restaurants and our small businesses, I think this one is a big deal in terms of making more room on state highways for other modes of transportation. And we're really grateful. I think I read in some of your materials, it's related to the context sensitive planning model that you now have, or engineering model. And, that is generally a big leap forward. And we're really pleased by what it has produced here in the county, and we want to see a lot more application of it. So, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the conversation. Councilmember Joando, I appreciate the seeds which you helped plant, and I also want to recognize all the farmers out there who've been working these fields for a while and in collaboration as well. So good stuff. And along those same line of thinking, I think if there is a silver lining in this pandemic, it's clearly been how we've been reimagining our public spaces, and that's the heart of the sentiment that was just shared. And so, a lot of these pilot programs, clearly they're showing success, whether it's land use, the parks, recreation, and road usage with SHA. And, you know, even as traffic volumes originally plummeted and now they're starting to return to pre-pandemic levels, you know, I'm curious about the popularity of some of the open streets, you know, for pedestrians and cyclists who now have more traffic to deal with, right? As the environment continues to change, not only getting colder, but as the roadways start filling back up again. And so this really is an important conversation to figure out the future use of those roads. And so my question to SHA is, given the success that you just shared for the different areas, how do you think that this can reshape and help us rethink some of these roadways moving forward? Because I think, as my colleague said, you know, usually we all have to bang pretty hard to get regulatory changes, to change the mindset of huge bureaucracies within government. But here we've been able to do it in short order, and it's proved successful. So as we look forward, how does this inform your work moving ahead?
Thank you, Councilmember Glass, for that question. And I think it gets back to that last point about University Boulevard in terms of our context-driven approach, what that really means. It kind of suggests being responsive to needs and changing times. So for example, on 193, it's a 6-lane roadway, it's 35 miles an hour. And under non-COVID conditions, it's probably carrying 40,000 cars per day. So would this have been a pilot project several years ago? It's tough to say, but at the same time, I think that what we can do is leverage some of these pilot projects and see how they can span out to other similar corridors. SHA probably more so has multi-lane corridors across the state that maybe we can take a look at and work with the community to see if there's other corridors that would be just as effective. So again, 193 will be a big project for us in terms of monitoring and evaluating. It's also a big project because of the source in terms of how we're going to move that forward in terms of federal funding and research, a research component to that as well. So what I would say is that, again, I think we're trying to be responsive, and all the agencies are really, but be responsive and also at the same time understand that we're still in changing times. What was static yesterday will not be static tomorrow under this pandemic. So we have to kind of keep our ears and listen to what's happening. Community, they've been great working with us, and we'll have to make sure that we continue to dialogue with them, and that's very important. And I think we're going to get there in terms of, as a group, coming up with these type of projects and what's in the best interest of everyone using our roadways.
I'm just going to say amen. I love that response. The desire to recognize what's worked and the desire to continue moving forward. I think that is fantastic, and I look forward to working with you and my colleagues towards that shared goal. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Glenn Orland.
Oh, thank you. This is for, I guess, for Derek and Joseph, but maybe also for Chris. You know, University Boulevard is a master plan bus rapid transit route running from downtown Wheaton to New Hampshire Avenue. The plan does not call for University Boulevard to be widened to accommodate the BRT. In fact, if I recall correctly, the master plan says try to run it in the median, but as has been often the case when we plan BRT, we find that isn't necessarily going to work. And the next best thing, as we're seeing on the US 29 corridor, is to take away a lane basically and set it aside for the buses. I guess what concerns me is that if we take away a lane in each direction for bikes, in the long term, where does the BRT go? And the University Boulevard BRT is not going to happen for at least a decade. There are 4 or 5 other BRT lines in front of it in terms of funding. Maryland 355 from Clarksburg down to Bethesda, Viersville Road from Rockville to Wheaton, New Hampshire Avenue from White Oak down to DC, and the North Bethesda Transitway from White Flint over to 270 are all ahead of University Boulevard. In fact, there's not even any money in the CIP yet for even the initial planning. And that's why I'm thinking it's at least 10 years off. However, if the University Boulevard proposal you're putting forward is implemented, effectively that will put into play a reduced cross-section for non-bikes to 4 lanes for 10 years. And if then there's desire to do the University Boulevard BRT, which I'm assuming the council wants to continue to do, that is in the master plan, where does it go? And I'm a little sensitive to this because the experience we had with the Purple Line. When we planned the light rail line between Bethesda and Silver Spring initially, it was supposed to be with a light rail on a trail. And then, of course, the light rail didn't happen. And so there was a big push from trail advocates to have it set aside for a trail. And that, in fact, was what happened for 30 years. And you see how difficult it's been with the community to essentially reclaim that right of way for its original use, which is both the trail and the light rail. I'm a little worried about this, I guess is what I'm saying. And I just don't know if in planning what you plan for the University Boulevard section, whether you took this into account.
Do you mind if I answer that, Derek?
Joe, thank you.
I would say that this is a different initiative in that it is certainly finite.
Okay.
When we pursue FHWA funds, it is under the guise of a study. So obviously it will be finite. We're thinking seasonal. So our target is spring 2021. So we do factor in bus stops. We are not impacting any bus stops. We have a 200-foot or so gap in any proposed traffic control devices at all bus stops along the project corridor of University Boulevard. And I believe you referenced a 10-year timeline for the BRT.
At least 10
We
years.
will be long gone before any significant planning for the BRT on University Boulevard is implemented.
So the idea is that the University Boulevard is temporary. It's not
temporary.
It's
correct.
It's tended. Well, as long as it's advertised for that. I just want to point out one more thing for the I can't remember if it's Mr. Reamer or another mentioned. I think it's Mr. Reamer mentioned this. There is in the master plan a basically a bike greenway, or I believe that's what it is, along Georgia Avenue, not on Georgia Avenue, but on the block east of it, from all the way from Silver Spring up to Wheaton. It includes Amherst Avenue. In fact, there's a planning study, a very detailed planning study that Park and Planning is halfway through completing. DOT is halfway through completing, sorry, which was reviewed by the planning board just this past week, and will go to T&E in January for their review, which would create a very high-class bikeway along Amherst, as well as eventually other roads connecting to it south of there, all the way to Silver Spring. And so there will be other way to get to Wheaton from Silver Spring, Forest Glen area, rather than coming across University Boulevard in the long term. Okay, I just wanted to raise that concern. But if it's only temporary and it's advertised as that, and that people understand that, and that suddenly temporary ends up being permanent in people's minds, that's the concern. Thank you.
I do want to add one more detail. With this COVID, everything is dynamic. Pedestrian volumes, bicyclist volumes are obviously going to peak during warmer seasons, and they're gonna slough down during the winter months. Additionally, any programs we do to take a lane for bicyclists and pedestrians, we do want to consider the fact that in the winter months there will be snow removal. So all of our planning is for dynamic applications. Consider removing traffic control devices, reinstalling at another location when weather permitting.
All right. I also have to say, I would not be so worried that creating a lane there would get so much intense use that it would create the kind of problem that we got with the rail to trail, Capitol Crescent Trail. I just think it's different enough. I find it hard to expect that we should be too worried about that, but I hear what you're saying. It's been a challenge for the community, Glenn, but I think we ought to proceed and not be too worried about what might or might not happen in 10 or 15 years. Good. Any other comments here? All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate your work, SHA. It's been a exemplary program. I think you've won a lot of hearts and minds in Montgomery County with this approach, and we appreciate that very much. And we want to just see more. That's the problem when you do something people like, they want you to do more of it. So we want to see more of these treatments. In fact, I think with Amherst, we have an issue coming up. We're going to need you to help us do a protected crossing on University for that trail that Glenn was just referencing. I think the future Amherst bikeway. But lots more to come. Great. Why don't we turn to MCDOT?
Thanks, SHA.
Yes, thanks for being here. We invite you to stay. It may be appropriate for you to stay through at least the MCDOT portion, but it's up to you, of course, with your schedule.
And we'll pass along our thanks for all your good work to the Secretary as well. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Hello.
There.
Am I audible now?
You are audible.
Great. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm Hannah Henn, and I apologize for the challenges earlier. I was thinking about it as I was waiting to rejoin you all and feel like what just happened with my audio is a great example of why shared streets are so important to provide a place for people to actually interact with each other in person without these technological challenges today. So we were last before you on June 24th. And at that time, the program had just started at the end of May. As I mentioned back then, this has always been an iterative approach. We're trying to be flexible, work with residents, adjust as we go. And today I'm really excited to share our story and show you some great images of what we've seen out on the street as a result of the program. Okay. So just as a recap, although we have some variance on the program, generally we really focus on this three-pronged approach. So our first aspect of the program that we spend a lot of effort on is the outdoor seating, curbside retail for dining. We also support on-street walking and biking through our temporary neighborhood greenways, through closing Arlington Road as an extension of the Little Falls Parkway closure done by Parks, and most recently Newell Street. And as an alternative, earlier you all were speaking about special events. Previously, DOT had a block party permit program, and we have just totally rethought that program and pivoted, and we have provided shared street block permits throughout since early June. This really relies on collaboration, and it has been, especially at a time when many of us feel disconnected and our work has changed dramatically. This has been a great opportunity for people at DOT to work collaboratively with parks, planning. We appreciate their partnership, and really the regional service centers and the directors of those districts have been extremely helpful. We don't determine necessarily where outdoor dining should take place. We evaluate the engineering and the traffic aspects, but really the regional service centers, we look to them to get the pulse from the community as to whether the locations we're considering are actually helpful. So outdoor dining, I'm just sharing this here. We, at the moment, because the Georgia Avenue has changed to curbside pickup, the outdoor dining locations that we are supporting there are 2 locations in Bethesda and also 1 location in Wheaton. You'll see here that, these spaces have really, I think once the community and businesses, in addition to the need for support, once this felt like a longer term effort, they've really been creative and made these spaces very welcoming. I was speaking with people from the Bethesda Urban Partnership, who have been a key leader in the Norfolk Avenue streetery, and they were saying that something that they've noticed in Bethesda is that they're seeing millennials who live in Bethesda really stay and go out in Bethesda and spend time here, and there's been a demographic shift that is pretty interesting in the type of customers using these spaces. So you can tell here by the leaves in the street that even though the weather has turned chilly in fall, people are still out there using the streets. This is Norfolk Avenue, supported by Bethesda Urban Partnership. They sanitize the tables between uses. They kind of beautify the space, and they have a team out there making sure that this space feels safe and it is appropriately monitored. Here it is also being used in the evening recently, November 4th. We also were very glad to see the Path of Pyramids for the Wheaton's Art Parade and Festival put a large piece of artwork in the Wheaton Streetery. This is the Wheaton Streetery, and this is was taken at a time of day where the restaurants weren't even open, but you still see, even with the restaurants not open, a child walking through, a family with bikes and strollers. And so even when these spaces aren't being used for dining, they're still being used. Here I have an image of what's going on in Bethesda. This was taken last Friday. On Norfolk Avenue, they are decorating for the season. And you'll see in the lower left-hand corner, again, use even in the afternoon, evening hours, it is, there's a lot of attention going to make this space feel welcoming and attractive to the public. In addition to the actual street, something that I always try to share is that, we have much more than our streets. I am all for rethinking how we use public spaces, but we have so many adjacent spaces. And so it was really fantastic, in my opinion, that the Silver Spring, the urban district, they procured tables and put them out in Veterans Plaza to try to extend the opportunities for outdoor dining in Silver Spring. And this was taken early in the morning, so nobody's at the tables, but the use of these tables has been so successful that the neighboring Peterson company's developer purchased the same tables and put them along the curbside across the street on Ellsworth Drive. And Peterson has also installed tables in their plaza. You see these blue and green fixtures.
Hannah, can you quickly, who bought those tables? Was that the urban district, or was it who bought those?
I believe it was a partnership between the CUP and the urban district.
CUP, that's right.
Those tables. And then,
Yeah, sorry, continue. Well, we're gonna come back to everything. Very happy about the tables. I think we asked for those to be bought in March or maybe April. And it did take until, I don't know when they finally arrived. It was maybe August or something. So we're going to be talking about the good, and then some lessons learned. And I think we need a more nimble way to get money on the street, like literally. CUP was constrained in its procurement process to buy those tables. And it took a really, really long time. But it's an awesome thing now that it's done. So. Yeah,
so DOT was not a part of that.
Right.
Like I said, that all of this was taking place off of the street. I was just trying to show some neighboring support, but I can say that I have heard that they are actively already working to secure additional tables like these. I don't have any details, but I think with the news of the winterizing, the special appropriation for winterizing support, that there is an already activity taking place to try to secure more resources like that.
Good. Thank you.
So for on-street walking and biking, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Kyle Lucas in a moment. But here you see, I just want to point out that when people are out using these spaces, it is not apparent how many people make it happen. And later on, I will show some photos of more of the team. But here you see a setup taking place for the temporary neighborhood greenways, which we have significantly expanded since we were last before you, and I'm excited for Kyle to be able to share that with you now. So I will go ahead and go back on mute and ask that Kyle tell you all about it.
Great.
Thanks, Hannah. This is Kyle Lucas. I'm going to go ahead and just provide some background on kind of how we selected some of these routes. So we started by looking at the neighborhood greenway routes from the bicycle master plan, since these are generally streets that don't have enough room for bike lanes, run parallel to major roads, or serve as kind of key connections between other bike infrastructure. The key goal of a neighborhood greenway is to minimize vehicular volumes and speeds while prioritizing bicycle and pedestrian travel. So it seemed like a perfect starting place for kind of planning some larger shared streets. So we launched 2 streets that we had already done some planning for. Those would be Grove Street and Holdridge Road. And after that, we went through and prioritized the remaining 86 neighborhood greenways in the bicycle master plan. So we looked at a variety of factors, connections to equity emphasis areas, bicycle and pedestrian priority areas, parks, and weekend parkway closures. We also looked at routes that lacked sidewalks or connected sidewalks or otherwise safe places to walk and bike, and also looked at routes that connected that didn't have any connections to parks or other open space to safely recreate. So once we prioritized and kind of ranked all of these neighborhood greenway routes, we worked with planning staff and advocates to kind of figure out which of these to do first. Next slide, Hannah. So since June, we've launched 6 new temporary neighborhood greenways. These provide connections, either direct access to trails and parkway closures such as Wyndham Lane, which connects to Sligo Creek Parkway and the trail, or Kennebec Ave, which connects to the Long Branch Trail. Some of the other ones serve as gateways to downtown areas, such as Woodland Drive, which connects both Silver Spring and Wheaton. Others provide a parallel alternative to walking or biking along a narrow sidewalk or otherwise kind of uncomfortable piece of infrastructure, such as Sudbury Road, which also provides access to some grocery stores and shopping. And next slide, Hannah. And so we have a couple of photos of them being used here. We've used most of the signs and barricades that we kind of acquired for this program, but have identified a few other areas we'd like to expand it to in the future. These include Maryland Ave, Ellsworth Drive, McComas Ave, Battery Lane, and Elm Street. And just want to point out, if you kind of look at this map on the left here, this shows a few things. It shows in purple the existing temporary neighborhood greenways that we currently have out. In red, these are the suggestions we've received from the advocates. And then finally, in blue is the kind of future phase that we've identified. I think it's worth kind of pointing out, we've done 3 of the routes already that the advocates had requested, and 3 of the future planned ones were also on their list. So I think it's a good sign that we're kind of on the same page as what some of the advocates are requesting here. And with that, I'll turn it back to Hannah.
Thanks, Kyle. So now I'm just going to share a few quick images of what we've seen out on the streets. I assume that the council members have also witnessed some of these for themselves, but for those who haven't, this slide, I just want to feature, we've seen a lot, in addition to, you know, biking and walking like we showed in the last slide, we've also seen a lot of really creative use of these spaces. On the right-hand side, just last week, our Regional Service Center Director, Rianberto Rodriguez, came across a family with their daughter out practicing for her, I think it's, you know, drum line or, you know, for her school activity. She was actually practicing in the street with a speaker with people watching her. On the left-hand side, when we did a shared street block, or actually when this was on Grove Street, right when it was put into place, the community arranged to have an ice cream truck come at a set time. They all knew it was coming. They drew these circles in the street to keep people separated from each other, and had a community gathering to celebrate the opening of the Grove Street Greenway. In addition to the temporary neighborhood greenways, we recently closed one block of Newell Street. Now, the neighborhood greenways are local access only, so they discourage vehicles from traveling through the area unless they actually have a destination within it. Newell Street is different in that it is entirely closed to vehicles for this one block. This was at the request of the community, and you know, there have been some mixed reactions to this, but just we invited feedback from the community. We received over 220 emailed responses that were quite detailed in the comments, and really had some very helpful feedback, both positive and negative. And so we recently determined, based on the feedback, which had almost 75% of people were for keeping this in place in the winter. So that feedback, in combination with our evaluation of traffic impacts and the fact that we feel, based on our coordination with fire and rescue services, that this is a safe installation for emergency situations, that we are keeping this in place. We have announced through March, at which time we will reevaluate. So here I'm going to just show you some pictures. So Newell Street is adjacent to a small pocket park, Acorn Park, which is of historic significance for the community. And so the closure of the block adjacent to it was done to act as an expansion of a small park, essentially provide more space in the park. And this was done in partnership with Parks when DOT determined that it would be safe engineering-wise to close this block. Parks said that they would gladly participate in activating the streets. They made this was a picnic in the park location for them. And they also put picnic tables in the area. Here you see people were out drawing maps, putting Frisbees out in the upper right-hand corner. Apparently somebody celebrated getting married in Acorn Park and out on the street.
Yes.
Here you see it being used in the evening. You'll see the picnic tables on the right, and people out using the street. This photo was taken the night of the Saturday of the election, where the election results were called. We saw a lot of stuff on social media of people out celebrating in the street that evening. Here's another evening photo showing the activation. And again, we do get a lot of feedback on whether this is necessary in the winter months. I will note that these pictures were all taken in November, and I was actually out there, maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, on a very cold and windy day. I went out, I didn't expect to see anybody there. It was a Monday at noon. I expected it to be empty. And I was there for about 15 minutes and saw a variety of people using it in different ways. I was really surprised. So just when these spaces are not always full, but when they are used, they appear to be used well and really appreciated by the community.
That's awesome.
Here's another November 27th. So the Friday after Thanksgiving, you see people out here again using the space adjacent to the park, and Parks has put in additional picnic tables in this location now as well. Here is just a photo to show that actually this is back to temporary neighborhood greenways. It's not the best photo because it's taken at night, but this was taken last Friday night. You can see a person walking in the foreground, and then in the back right, also somebody out jogging at night in the dark, feeling safe without a sidewalk, using these spaces for exercise. This was on that same Monday where I was out there, and it was freezing and windy, and this elderly couple was out taking a walk. I stopped and spoke with them, and I just was really glad to see again that they felt safe walking in the street. And so now we're on to the third prong of our approach, and that is the block permit. So, we have these defined areas that we support. It's all temporary, but kind of long-term temporary at this point. But for people who can't benefit from those, or have a need or a particular, desire to have some space dedicated that's more pedestrian friendly, we have a block permit program. So instead of block parties, which we're not encouraging, we have shared street block permits. And so they're different because in the past, block parties were just for one day and for, perhaps 4 to 6 hours. Now, when you get a block permit, it's for 3 days. It's Monday to Thursday or Friday to Sunday. So you get more space. If you have a rainy day or something, you still hopefully have some time to use it well. Also, for the block parties, we did not actually go out ourselves and set them up. We advise the block party permit holders how to, block up the street. For these, because we're not actually blocking up the street totally to traffic, again, it's local access only. So we're just discouraging vehicles from entering unless they have a destination within. We are actually going out and putting up physical signage, advising that this is, a different use is taking place. Also, because of the manpower and the amount of signs that we have, we can only do 5 at a time. So at all points in time, we can have 5 going on, but we really can't do more. So we do it with the current resources that we have. So that has been a challenge for times when are very popular, like around holidays or on school breaks where people want more. We would love to be able to do more, and we try to work with the community as much as we can to accommodate them. As I heard Councilmember Friedson say earlier, we try to start with yes instead of no, and this team has done an amazing job of starting with yes instead of no. You will see there's a geographic focus, kind of down county. And so one thing that we don't know why necessarily, but we really want to get the word out that this is available anywhere in the county. This part of the program can go to any neighborhood. It does not need to be in any area where we have other shared streets. And we are still seeing demand for this in December. We have had people reaching out this week saying that they want closures between Christmas and New Year's so that their children have some place to be. We've heard, and then for the neighborhood greenways, we've also just heard great feedback on them being a place for kids to go, like on Wednesdays when school ends early, a place for children to be together. So as I alluded to, we have our challenges in this program are manpower and materials. Those are some real challenges. We tried to put this out as quickly as possible. There's often an assumption that DOT has a large stash of these signs, and we really don't. So we had to purchase them, rent them. We did it as quickly as we could, but our resources are limited. As Kyle indicated, we have ideas for more temporary neighborhood greenways, but at the moment we don't have the signs to put them in place. Other challenges, we're heading into winter. We have worked with our snow removal team, and they have agreed to really go above and beyond. And when a snowstorm is coming, they are planning to go out in advance. They have a map of all of our locations. They're going to go out and either relocate the signs, or if conditions look to be, really extreme, they're going to bring them in and then put them back out after the storm event. Here you will see we're really having trouble with wind knocking our signs over. So we're hoping to get the resources this winter to put in more durable signage. So, we don't have the manpower to go out there and check these every day and put them up. And actually these photos I took on Grove, most of these are on Grove Street. The lower left is on Newell Street. I was out there picking all of these signs up, propping them up, and people walking down the street told me, don't even bother, the wind's going to knock them over in 5 minutes anyhow. So we are looking for other solutions. In combination with that, we are exploring the idea of, like Adopt a Road, Adopt a Shared Street, where we have designated people who are our eyes on the street and have a direct communication channel with us and guidance on how the street should look. We could provide them with renderings and maps of where the signs should be so that they can either relocate themselves if they're out of place or contact us if they see any issues. So we're going at it from both approaches. Adopt a Shared Street is, in development, and hopefully we will have it in place soon, and then also hoping to have better equipment out there. The last challenge that I will share is that these signs are very popular, and people are actually removing them from the neighborhood greenways and putting them in locations where they would like for them to be. So again, because they're not large water-filled barriers, which would be our preference, but they're costly. These signs, we're finding them missing in places where we've put them and relocated to places where people want them to be. And some of those places, our planners tell me some of those places really make sense. They have taken the signs and put them near parks, in the streets leading up to parks or other locations. But we also see these signs just gone altogether. And, sometimes people put them up on the sidewalk and then park their car in that place. So again, some challenges we are dealing with.
I'd like to put one in my kitchen after 9:00 p.m., for my kids, but yeah.
Can I just comment? I'm so eager to jump in. Hannah, to me, the temporary nature of these signs, the fact that there's so much community interest in them, the fact that they're being displaced and people are feeling empowered to improve their own neighborhoods and their own streets to make them safe for their kids to walk around and not tyrannized by cut-through traffic, only shows, the unmet need for these that's been building up for a long time. And it reminds me of when Councilmember Reamer, I think, led a town hall with former DOT Director Al Roshdi about the fact that there were too many Lime bikes in Silver Spring and they were ending up, people were leaving them everywhere, and some people even threw them in Sligo Creek and whatever. We've gotten on top of that. We've had the demand meet the supply, but that all was sort of a temporary inconvenience because there was a built up demand for something that the public had been asking for a long time. And the public's been asking for clean and safe streets where people could walk with their kids in their neighborhoods and not be constantly looking, in both directions for cars to be jumping out of the way of. These are taxpayers that paid for the very streets in front of their house, and they feel burdened by people from 10 miles away that are constantly cutting through their streets at high rates of speed. So, I think this is all a temporary, it's sort of a reflection of just the fact that there's been this pent-up demand.
It's always been there.
Improvements and enhancements in our neighborhood streets. And the same thing in Newell Street. Congrats on your nomination, by the way. The only thing I would correct about your, take issue with your fantastic presentation about Newell Street, which is, at the top of my list of unanticipated benefits of COVID, is the fact that people in that neighborhood have been asking for set aside recreational space for their young families and their kids for a long time. It's been completely ignored by the county for years. And the fact that you all were able to quickly set that aside and do a survey, and now 75% of the public says that was a good idea, only reflects the unmet need there. And let me just point out, you're presenting this to elected officials. In our world, 55% is a mandate, 60% is a landslide, and 75% is near consensus. So the only thing I would correct about your presentation is you don't have feedback on both sides. As far in our world, you have near consensus to keep Newell Street the way it is. People are rejoicing daily for that open space, to have safe space to recreate with their kids and patronize local restaurants and celebrate outside in this increasingly dense community. And, I very much think we need to keep it the way it is, because I don't even want to call it stumbled. Some of us have been asking for this for years, and now it's in place and it needs to be made permanent and improved upon. So, Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you. Great comments. Let's continue this. So, Anna, did you want to respond, please?
Oh, I was just going to say, I just have a couple more slides. Did you want me to finish those, or?
Well, every slide has something I want to say, and I'm trying to,
Okay.
I've exceeded my capacity, which is to remember like 3 things that I wanted to say.
Okay.
So I should take notes, but I do want to put a bookmark on your comment about the need for resources for signs and potentially staff. I think we need to hear from you if we want to do this more and do it quickly. What support can we provide? I mean, this is part of an immediate community need to, deal with a different reality. And so if we can provide some funding, I'm sure the council would be very interested in how to help you succeed with this. So whether it's different kinds of signage and by the way, revolutionary thinking, I know for DOT to adopt a street, concept here for this closure idea. That's tremendous. I really applaud that. But you had said that you were hoping to get resources for more signs. Tell us more what you meant.
Well, DOT had proposed, and I would actually like to push this to the Q&A so that Chris could participate in this. And we also have our division chief for traffic engineering who has some information on the signage. But I will say that we are actively exploring whether we can, for the winterizing the streeteries at a minimum, participate in that appropriation passed this week to get resources to better support the streeteries from a traffic control perspective, in addition to the heaters and tents and tables and chairs. But I will let Chris speak to that. Chris, do you want to address that question now or hold it for the end?
We can touch on that now. I mean, the way that we've been doing this is by kind of reprioritizing things in our funded work program, things related to the pedestrian safety CIP, neighborhood traffic calming, or operating budget items related to signage replacement. So the issue isn't so much that we've been limited in being able to do it, it's that it's deferring other work that would otherwise be occurring, and that may be appropriate in this condition, where the priority is to respond to this really challenging situation for our community, not so much to make sure that the reflectivity on our other signs is up to speed. So I think what Hannah mentioned is, the things that are really different for us are the water fill barriers that we don't have inventory of, and more, and actually those, we can secure these types of signs to those, and they're more rigid and durable. The appropriation you passed related to streeteries, I think can support this. I don't think we're going to be making a budget proposal as part of the executive's budget in January to ask for more money for this, but it is a challenge figuring out how to prioritize these implementations plus the regular work program we have to do.
Okay, so it sounds like we could actually explore at least something modest that would allow us to continue hitting on some of the things we need to hit on while expanding here a little bit.
I think that's a good characterization.
Sorry, can you say that again, Chris?
I think that's a good characterization of it.
Okay. While we're on that, the barriers that you do use are very transportation, the kind of they are transportation barriers. I've noticed, like in DC, they use those metal fences and then they put nice cloth coverings over them. There's even some signage, for a local business. Where are we on being able to use some of that kind of street furniture rather than, large highway dividers in a sort of compact urban setting?
Yeah, there's two pieces to this. One is crash worthiness. That may sound like an exaggerated concern, but we did have a suspected drunk driver crash into the barriers in the Wheaton streetery, which was a reinforcement to us that we do need to be paying attention to that. And you saw in the Georgia Avenue photos that State Highway had that they had the same concern. And Michael, I don't remember whether we provided those or State Highway did, but that was initially all temporary traffic control.
Yeah, for Georgia Avenue, Chris, those were provided by MDOT.
Okay, great. So we can be more decorative and we can cover the barriers, but really they do need to be crash worthy in most instances. And we don't have enough of that in all the places, so we do some assessment of the risk and the exposure at those locations. The other element is we've coordinated these with fire and rescue. So some of these are not fully filled and movable, some aren't. So that has to be considered too. There's not a concern with dressing up this material as long as it's visible, but it does have to meet some basic crash resistance in many of these cases. And as we go through this, we're trying to get more robust in that crash protection. And in the earlier phases, it was maybe less so, knowing the traffic was so low and the desire and need to get these in place is so great. But it can look better. It just that's
okay.
That's
I think it should. We are trying to create an inviting setting, and particularly in the areas where the restaurant is just really close by, it's sort of part of the landscape of the restaurant itself. And it'd be nice if it was, consistent.
It's for purposes with attracting customers.
Exactly. So if there's a way to create like an outer and an inner, layer or something, it's just, it does make a difference. I mean, you notice it when you are, you see street furniture that looks like it's compatible with outdoor dining versus, gigantic plastic.
You want to think as if there were a marketing firm in place or a business improvement district or something like that whose job it is to attract customers and not just block traffic safely, but actually present a attractive street, integrated streetscape. The more you can think like that and the less you can think, just as a highway department, I think will be advantageous. I did want to thank you, Director Conklin and Mr. Paler for the terrific work you did on Newell Street. I reacted to what Ms. Henn said, but I really am grateful to you for all the work you did getting Newell Street off the ground and getting past some of the barriers we've had in the past to getting that blocked off.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing?
I'd say about we saw a pretty big evolution in the environment in the Bethesda streeteries, and I think that was the attention of engaged landlords, and the urban district really did a lot to change the way that was from when it was initially installed. And to this, similarly, but to a less extent, the pictures Hannah was just showing of Wheaton. So I think, encouraging the placement of more furniture, more plants, more other features in these spaces can go a long way to making it a more attractive environment. And like was said earlier, when this was started, there was the thought that this was a couple-month thing, but we've seen it out there for 6 to 8 and probably going to be out there for a year, if not more. So it's time to spend attention on that.
I will just add to Chris's response that, to my knowledge, we have not said no to anybody who wanted to beautify their space. We're scrambling to do as much as we can and to support the community as much as we can. And, I would say we're certainly open to partnerships. If, we did collaborate with Parks on Newell Street, and I believe, Parks is going to present next, and I believe that they have plans to activate it further. And BUP is, putting some, BUP in Bethesda, the streeteries have some, aesthetic treatments. And if restaurants want to do that, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but they could certainly approach us with their ideas. But we, within DOT, we do not have a marketing team that we can actually do that ourselves.
Our mantra has been, tell us where and we'll figure out how, and then you use it how you think it's best used. That's kind of the approach we've had to take given our expertise and resources.
The continuous barrier has post holes. So if there's a desire for beautification, you could use the segments of the continuous barrier if it's available. And you can install whatever fencing or banners atop that barrier. I would consider that to be the best solution to make the best with what you have.
Okay. To be continued, I think. Appreciate your looking closer at this as we go forward. And okay, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The comments that you and Councilmember Hucker, that President Hucker, were talking about the road signs. Who would have thought, right, that the road signs would be in such demand and are like walking away from where we place them. And with regard to Newell Street and Acorn Park, I also want to echo District 5 Councilmember Hucker for complimenting the residents who have been actively engaged. And I just want to call out, Paul Meyer and David Fogel for their incredible activism. Fun fact, David Fogel and I, however many years ago, 15, 16 years ago, started the South Silver Spring Neighborhood Association right there in that neighborhood. I used to live a block or two away. And it's just incredible to see the community that has evolved and, helping build an area and help shape that area. And that's exactly what they've done here. And to see the community support, not universal, understand, but definitely the people who've been coming out is heartwarming. And so, as we, continue thinking about the communities, I think, Ms. Henn, you had said that these programs are available, across the county, right?
The block permits are available as long as they don't create, a safety issue. We, as we've been trying to indicate, we start with yes, and then try to approve. So they have approved of the requests we have received. I believe they've approved over 70% of them. And the ones that aren't approved, it's because they're on a state road that we don't control, or they're adjacent to an existing shared street, and it would create, you can't have all local traffic. You have to have somewhere for cars to go. But yes, they're available. The block permits are available countywide. The temporary neighborhood greenways, thus far, we have been focusing on areas identified in the master plan, and those tend to be in down county, which is why you don't see those in other areas. But the block permit program is absolutely open, and our support of streeteries can happen anywhere.
Have we reached out to the municipalities, mainly Rockville and Gaithersburg, to have them disseminate amongst their residents for these types of opportunities?
Well, they have implemented streeteries for sure, and they control their own residential roads, so I'm not exactly sure what they've been doing for that, but certainly we'd be willing to share lessons learned. And
Right, the neighborhood roads, the residential roads, right. And then I presume actually in most of those areas, within those municipalities, most of the other roads are probably state roads, the major ones at least that we can think of.
It's not too many county roads,
right,
jurisdictions. And they tend to have more available green space in those neighborhoods than we see in some of the county areas.
I appreciate that. And speaking from firsthand experience, I had a number of neighbors reached out to me and said they wanted to close some roads for Halloween, and recognizing that that was a different situation because the county was trying to dissuade people from having that type of congregating event, and so their application was rejected, or whatever the terminology might be, and I understand that. And then, you know, I'm walking my dogs one day and I saw a sign, one of these signs that had popped up for closing a very small 1-block street. And then I think the next day it was gone. The whole apparatus, the stand and everything. And I hadn't realized or thought that they were being stolen, right, or repurposed, whatever terminology we want to use. But what is the what are the metrics or the feedback needed for a street to stay closed, as opposed to one that just stays open? Because I'm thinking that there clearly was some negative feedback for the one that was in my neighborhood that it was removed.
And I can start with that. There's a real challenge with something staying closed. I mean, we start to get into other legal questions, planning questions, real estate access questions. So everything we're doing through this program is temporary. We're trying to hold to the time limits in the block permit programs. For the greenway ones, there's in theory been, or there has been public process about those roads being planned as greenways. So we're more confident that they can be in place longer. But you know, until we make other decisions about more permanent closure of roads, everything is temporary. And we're not committing to anything in the permanent condition.
Right. I'll yield to Councilmember Hucker.
The legal structure is they would have to go through the existing abandonment process. Is that not right, Mr. Conklin, Director?
Or another public hearing process to use that land differently. Right. And if it's right of way, it still has a transportation function. And to be honest with you, in the environment of this pandemic, those are questions we're ready to deal with. Right. But if there is a desire for long term, then we'll work through that stuff.
There is a legal pathway right now, and they are just difficult and have high hurdles for obvious reasons. Right? Is that all fair?
Right. Yeah, and this is response to the very unusual public health situation. Permanent closure or repurposing these streets, I don't sit here today knowing exactly all the steps that need to be followed, but we would have to outline that process and then go through that. And it's possible that
last question I have, there was, I think Chair Raymer was talking about crash protections and, trying to figure out how to make them more enjoyable, making the environment, right, better and more enjoyable for everybody, and having more bups or a bup-like mentality, I think President Hucker mentioned. Towards that end, on Tuesday, we had a very engaging conversation as we appropriated more funds for the winterization program. And there were questions about kind of liability, right, with going into the right-of-way. Have you encountered any legal situations where, in New York, I know that they had to change the law to allow portable gas heaters into the public right-of-way, and for accommodating, other types of, occurrences, whether it's eating, congregating, whatever it might be. Have there been any legal problems that we've encountered along the way with any of these programs?
I'll be speaking a little beyond my expertise here, but I know Alcohol Beverage Services has taken steps to allow consumption of alcohol in these spaces.
Well, that's an easy one. We control that.
Permitting Services is taken steps to allow temporary structures. I'm not sure about heaters and other things like that, whether those have been problematic.
Let me rephrase it. Have there been any lawsuits regarding these activities?
Not that I've seen, and the ones that we would have been more around personal injury related to the temporary traffic. Those are the ones that would show up at DOT, or if there were a traffic crash, but I haven't seen any.
No, that's good stuff. I'm glad to know there aren't any lawsuits, that everyone's doing everything above board. And again, most of all, people are enjoying this. So thank you for the good work.
All right, a couple more quick things here, and then we're going to go to Christy Daphnis, and I see Glenn has a comment. I'll turn to you just in a second, Glenn. I want to give a quick shout out to Allison Gillespie, who had been building the program with DOT, following some early conversations. And then when the Newell Street folks started to, when Dave Fogel and Paul started asking about how to do something, I know I connected them with Allison, who had kind of been building the model with DOT, and they worked all together, and they created something really exciting there. So I want to thank acknowledge the community-driven nature of all this, and again, applaud DOT for its really progressive work. And just say briefly, because I don't want to open a big can of worms, but I think there's some interesting possibilities there over the long term. We got to come back to this Acorn Park question. There might be a way to think bigger about that space, and if DOT had the resources to go out and attend to that space, but they at this point that isn't there. But maybe there's a different kind of like a Woodruff Street or something that we can do that is more akin to Ellsworth, over the long term. I don't know. Maybe the Silver Spring master plan is a way to think about that, which is presently under development at Park and Planning, or if that is too slow, we could convene a group to do some thinking together. But, it does seem like we know that part of the county needs more public space, and it's not that close to Ellsworth, and, it's been appreciated. So, and there's some longstanding issues with Acorn Park that maybe this is a way to connect to Pocket Park and Acorn Park. Who knows? So we can come back to
that. And just as a note, the Norfolk Avenue streetery is a location that's planned as a Woodruff and shared street for a permanent configuration in the Bethesda. This would be akin to that.
Right. Although this would be, yeah. Well, anyway, we'll get people together to continue that conversation, thinking bigger. I know Councilmember Hucker will be very interested in that.
Yes.
Is very interested in that.
I am.
Okay, so I have Glenn and then Andrew.
This is real quick. As a follow-up to a question was raised earlier about the process for closing streets permanently. There is a process in the law. It's the same process as for road abandonments. Basically, there's an application for it. Usually it's from the county itself, but that DOT, for example, if it's a county street. And then there's reach out to all the agencies in the county and some of the state and the utilities, see if there's an objection to it. And then it goes to an executive public hearing. It's ex parte, just like abandonments are. Eventually, there's a recommendation from the executive to the council, and the council acts on it. That process for abandonments is usually taken about a year. For something that's a simple road closure, it could take only maybe several months, but there is a process in place for that. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Andrew?
Yeah, just really briefly, based on Director Conklin's comment, Norfolk, I mentioned at the previous hearing an interest in trying to accelerate the planning for that, for the shared street concept, because that is how it is envisioned. I do think that as we've had this conversation, this is another silver lining here. COVID has accelerated so many things that are negative. And this is an example where we have an opportunity to accelerate something that is positive, that's had a tremendously enthusiastic response from the community. And this is something that we were planning on doing. We didn't need the crisis to know that this was where we wanted to go, but perhaps we needed the crisis to get us there a little faster. And so I just wanted to note that again and make that comment. I'll follow up as we've talked about previously, but I do hope that we don't go backwards with that we've made progress there, that it's been a positive, it works, and we can continue to make sure that it continues to happen without shutting it down and then, going back where we are always planning to go from the planning perspective all along. So just want to make that comment. Thank you.
Amen. All right, so we have.
Could I add real quick to Mr. Friedson said?
Sure.
The planning money for that Norfolk Avenue shared street actually is programmed currently for FY22 and 23. So it should start, unless there's a change that council makes in CMP, it should start this next fiscal year.
Okay. Another win from the Bethesda sector plan. Progressive thinking positions you to take advantage of the moment. And we had already envisioned making that street what the moment needs. That's, just a comment on the benefit of doing progressive forward-thinking planning. DOT, I know I cut you off maybe a slide or two before you're done. Is that, we're all good? Okay, we're gonna adjust the schedule a little bit. Christy Daphnis is gonna go next, and then we'll go to Parks. So Christy and her comrades, her fellow community leaders have been working to bring all of this to us and make it happen. Christy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Reamer and Chair Hucker, for allowing me to provide input on this briefing today before the joint committee. I really appreciate you also moving me up in the agenda. I need to get back to my actual paid job here in a few minutes, so I appreciate that. As chair of the Pedestrian, Bike, and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, I really believe that it's important to pursue innovative pilot projects that can help improve the safety and accessibility of the roadways within our county. As shown in the content from the previous presenters, shifting and adapting roadways to accommodate more pedestrians and bicyclists during COVID has been very well received and is an overall success. When we last met in June, I asked the council members, the county, and SHA to consider a framework that does three things during and potentially beyond COVID pandemic crisis. As a reminder, that was to provide additional space on our roadways for pedestrians and bicyclists as a recreational outlet. Second, to support the use of our streets for dining and other commerce activities. And third, to provide better pedestrian and bicyclist connectivity between commerce centers, business district, and employment centers. In June, we were just at the beginning of all this, and it's really hard to believe that at that time, there was a question over whether or not it made sense to close parkways to cars. We've come a really long way since June. And I can see that over time, as the COVID crisis stretches on, there's really a hint of a culture change here. Whether that will be limited to these pandemic times or whether that could and should be extended long into the future does remain unknown, but I'm really cautiously hopeful. I'm also glad this is a joint hearing because this is not just about transportation, but also about economic development and the intersection between mobility, commerce, and the use of public space. So I think that it's a really important discussion to have between both transportation and the economic development committees. Over the past several months, adjacent to my PBT-SAC chair activities, I've continued to co-lead the coalition of county advocacy organizations to help further these goals that I mentioned, loosely known as the Open Streets Montgomery Coalition. Peter Gray, representing WABA, and community advocate Allison Gillespie has served as co-leaders of this initiative, bringing together the Sierra Club, Action Committee for Transit, several civic associations, and individual advocates and residents. While the interests in this project are really diverse, the goals remain as stated above. This group of volunteers has worked hand in hand with MCDOT, Parks and Planning, and the State Highway Administration to provide informal recommendations and advice on planned and ongoing projects, while also helping to gather broad community input to help shape MCDOT and SHA projects in ways that best serve the community. I think that was pointed out by both MCDOT and SHA, so we're happy to see that they appreciate that input. Overall, we are very pleased with the progress that's been made in the shared street space. Both MCDOT and the Parks and Planning departments have been very communicative and open to suggestions and ideas, even during a time when we know that resources, both financial resources and human capital resources, are constrained. And the State Highway Administration has been open to working on projects that really shift the use of highway and curbside space, especially in or near our urban areas, to more pedestrian and bicycle friendly spaces. And this is being done to a degree we've never really seen before. As a general observation, the approach MCDOT has taken with its shared streets program under the leadership of Chris Conklin, Hannah Henn, and Michael Paler, in many ways has been able to achieve more than most of our neighboring jurisdictions in both in DC and in Northern Virginia. Our program here in Montgomery County is relatively cohesive, and it breaks down many of the barriers that have traditionally been in place across MCDOT and with partner agencies. I won't go into the specifics on the status of various projects, as these are well covered by other briefers in this presentation. However, I'll give particular mention to the following. First, we're pleased to see that both the Parkway projects and the Newell Street closure will be extended throughout the winter months. While we may not see the peak numbers that we saw in the late spring, early summer in terms of usage, people are still using these parkways in the street space, and we really expect that they'll continue to do so throughout the winter months. The parkways continue to provide outdoor recreation and connectivity for residents. We even see ways that the downtown Silver Spring team could use the space that's currently set aside to do events that might support local restaurants and local businesses. We're also very, very excited about the planned pop-up bike lane on University Avenue between Sligo Creek Trail and Amherst. As noted, SHA hasn't done any similar projects of this scope. So it's really encouraging to see that they're open to exploring traffic calming measures and better bike PHED infrastructure along state highways in Montgomery County. Further, this too will achieve a goal of connectivity as it connects the closed parkway with the Wheaton CBD. We hope this can be scaled, not just on University, but on other state highways and connective corridors. Glenn mentioned some of the challenges that might come with BRT. I would just note that in early discussions, we had discussed only one lane being closed for a bidirectional bike lane that would stretch from Wheaton all the way to Four Corners. I would say that in the long term, there's a lot of space there on University Avenue and probably a need for a road diet anyway. I think that if we were to actually look at the design of that corridor, there would be plenty of space to fit both BRT as well as some additional enhanced PHED bike infrastructure. So I don't think that this necessarily needs to be a barrier in the long term. Lastly, it's also encouraging to see MCDOT leaning into some of the planning efforts that are on the books, working with the planning department to recognize opportunities present in the Bikeways Master Plan and other guiding documents. The neighborhood greenways portion of the Shared Streets project has been somewhat inconsistently successful, more successful in some areas versus others. But in certain areas, like on Grove Street, as Hannah showed in the pictures, we've really been able to show the value of opening up more spaces to neighborhood pedestrians, providing a safe space to walk, but also helping to foster a greater sense of community. The same goes for some of the shorter temporary street closures that MCDOT has allowed to pop up across the county. As a group, the Open Streets Coalition maintains a vision for safe and accessible pedestrian and bicycle space and remains committed to the three goals I stated at the beginning of this briefing: recreation, commerce, and connectivity. With that said, it may be helpful for the council, county executive, and relevant participating agencies to focus in on the following things in the coming months. First, an expansion of state highway projects. When we urge SHA to gather data and to continue to work on piloting and expanding projects across our state highways, particularly in and near urban districts on routes that can connect commerce centers and on routes that are considered to be high injury network areas. We urge the council, MCDOT, and SHA to revisit the list that I provided in the June hearing, the 19 miles of state highways that could be further activated for PEDs and bikes, to see if there are other areas of opportunity along state highways to expand action as we move into the spring. SHA have indicated that they notionally agree with most of the segments identified. So given the amount of lead time and resources that are required, we really should work towards trying to take action on those opportunities as soon as possible. Second, providing more cohesive action in high commerce areas. We would like to see additional work on actions to bolster shared streets in central business districts and high commerce areas. particularly work that can help support the restaurant industry and service workers. It's understandable that these projects are very challenging with limited curbside space, particularly as winter and snow and ice removal procedures complicate matters. But supporting and maintaining commerce is an area of concern for many. Also, we should be working to make these types of programs feasible in all areas of the county, not just where there are developer funds like the Bethesda Urban Partnership. We'd love to see the commerce lessons learned in places like Bethesda be applied to Silver Spring, Wheaton, and other regional service center and commerce areas, including those in the Up County and East County. We think this would be a great place for the county executive and the county council to help. As one specific example, given the streeteries that exist in Silver Spring and Wheaton, we see ways that the downtown Silver Spring team and the Wheaton CBD team could use these spaces as a spot to do events that might support local restaurants and other businesses. These could be places for food truck events and for programming like the S'mores night that they're doing in Veterans Plaza, hosted by restaurants or other businesses. That's just an example. Third, we would ask that you consider refining and streamlining the permitting process, not just related to the streets themselves, but the space around streets. We're excited by the idea of using the open parkways and/or shared streets projects for food truck or other socially distanced community events that might support local businesses and restaurants. We have heard feedback from local businesses that would like to occasionally use some of the parking lots and other adjacent spaces for things like socially distanced exercise classes, yoga, and the likes. We think that this would be an amazing way to use parkland and other public or private space, and would be very beneficial for supporting healthy recreation, boosting commerce, and supporting small local businesses. We have heard and have been dismayed that some businesses have approached the county about this and have been turned away or found the permitting process to be exasperating. If the permit process could be streamlined for these purposes under COVID, much like the shared streets permitting process streamlined the way that neighborhood streets were made available, we think that would really help a lot. And last but not least, we would appreciate the county and the council supporting any additional marketing and communications support, as well as maintenance resources for MCDOT and others involved in this process. Ensuring that MCDOT and the regional service directors have the resources and support to participate in increased communications with citizens and stakeholders, like various chambers of commerce, business owners, and civic associations across the county, and making sure that MCDOT has enough resources to maintain traffic control devices is really important. MCDOT to date has been great about promoting and partnering, but additional support and outreach on this program could be helpful in building an understanding of the goals, objectives, and benefits of the program, as well as expanding it to other parts of the county. As Hannah mentioned, a lot of activity that's happening now is happening in the down county, and we think that there could be some other benefits in additional areas. So again, thank you very much for allowing me to participate today. I look forward to continued partnership on this and other important issues, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Christy. Can you please send your written, or if you have written, send it to all of us so we can
Sure.
go through it afterwards as well. You know, you've given us a lot there. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Really appreciate that. I guess I'll start us off. Very interesting idea about sort of an analogous permit program for businesses that do yoga and other types of exercise that might be shut down during COVID. It's a kind of you've constrained the way to think about it so that it isn't just, well, we're going to allow anybody to use streets for any purpose for a business. You know, that could get very messy, but maybe there's a way to kind of focus in on certain businesses that have been shut down in COVID. And can't.
Yeah, and it may not be just the street itself, but also some adjacent areas or even parkland.
Right. Exactly. I mean, so let's get Casey real quick. You know, can you talk to us about, do you have the ability to allow for example, a yoga business to operate classes in a park? Is a permit required? If so,
yeah, well, that's not a question we've been specifically asked in conjunction with this pandemic. I think we're open to looking at just about anything, but we do have a established system for permitting for those types of uses and vendors who run things like boot camps and Tai Chi and things like that. So we have to just be careful. It's similar. It's analogous to an issue we had with fee waivers. Often we get requests from various nonprofits who are running like athletic programs. They say, "Could you give us a fee waiver?" Our IG will audit us periodically and make sure that we're being even-handed in the way that we dole those out. So my answer is, of course, we're open to that, and we're very much looking for ways to try out new things. But we also just have to be careful that we. Not just because we're concerned about following the rules, we may need to change the rules, but we have to make sure that we do it in a way that's fair to everybody, including our existing folks who are, paying us for the use of park space.
Yeah.
Who is in charge of Newell Street on that issue? Is that Parks or is that DOT?
Well, if it's in the park, it's us. If it's in the right-of-way, it's DOT.
Right.
And we've worked I think we work pretty well with them. It's sort of, we're not trying to put up a fence between the two things, but if somebody wants to, for example, put up a hot dog stand in Acorn Park, they have to deal with us. If they want to put their food truck in the street, then that's a DOT issue.
Is there a way, to DOT then, is there a way that, companies that want to do like health related work, classes can have an easy permit for open
As
street?
I say, we have been audited on this issue. So
I'm sorry, I was letting you a little bit off the hook there. I was going to Hannah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So we don't have any sort of formal permitting process that I know of, and I know Michael Taylor is still on the line, and he is our chief of our division of traffic engineering. So I would invite Michael to weigh in here, but I do know that in Newell Street, there were some community challenges with an event wanting to take place and feeling that the park's existing process was a little cumbersome. And I think they ultimately performed their event in the street instead. We did not require a permit from them. We are interested in supporting if the street is closed and not being used, and it is, in terms of liability, it is an activity that can take place and our risk management feels comfortable with it. We are certainly open to that idea. We don't want to close the street, and restaurants don't open until 11 a.m. and, something could be taking place in the morning. I believe there were the only requests that I have heard of, I believe, were in Bethesda, and I think there were some concerns there. Michael, do you have any more information on?
Just a little bit, and Council President Hucker and other council, and I apologize for not formally saying hi when we were on a call earlier, but here's your hi, and it's been good to work with you. With regard to what Hannah said, there was a request in Bethesda from a yoga studio to utilize the closed space. I think there were, at that time, we were looking at potential for closing some parking areas along Bethesda Avenue. And so the yoga studio was interested in using that space to do yoga. And certainly we had some concerns. We thought about people laying in the street and practicing yoga. But to cycle back to the original discussion point, when the street is closed, and Hannah communicated that, very aptly, when the street is closed, as long as you don't see that there is still any inherent risk of use of the facility while that street is closed, we really aren't looking to govern what happens behind that closure. So if it's retail, if it's restaurant oriented, we're certainly interested in allowing those things to happen.
Great, thank you. And we'll follow up, Christy, on the suggestion of the other 19 miles. We'll ask Glenn and DOT maybe to respond to us with some details about what's planned, what their outlook is on those. So
sounds great. I'll send you my statement and we can go from there. Thank you.
okay, we still haven't heard from Parks yet, and they've got a big ticket item. Any comments from my colleagues before we do that? All right, let's proceed. Casey.
So I'm going to turn over to Mike and Darren in a second, but I just wanted to say that we have taken every opportunity to think of new ways to do new things during this pandemic. I mean, we're always talking internally about how can we shake things up and how can we try out new things. When I became chair, I told the staff that the important thing is not to avoid failure. It's if you're going to fail quickly. And if you're never failing, you're probably not doing anything to make progress. And I think in the case of the pandemic, almost everything we've tried has been worked out pretty well. We've had to, to recalibrate a little bit in some cases. But as far as the parkway closures are concerned, I think that's been a tremendous success. We've had a lot of cooperation from the neighbors. We've had to scramble sometimes to buy equipment and get the infrastructure in place to facilitate the closures. But all in all, I think it's been great, and we plan on continuing those indefinitely, even past the pandemic. But we are adjusting a little bit on Little Falls because we have some logistical challenges there with we don't have the same gates that we do on Sligo and Beach Drive. So we've had to spend a lot more overtime and move a lot more equipment to get that done. And we're sort of dealing with some of those logistical issues, but we're not ending the program in Little Falls. We're just taking a temporary break so we can sort some of those things out. In the meantime, we'll continue to close Beach and Sligo in the places where they've been closed to date over the weekends on through the winter. So with that, I'd turn it over to Mike and Darren.
Thank you, Casey. I am pleased to be here. I'm thrilled that the Joint Committee today is listening to a bunch of engineers talk about interesting and exciting things. And I do want to say that with me today is our trail program manager, Darren Flachet, and then also from the planning department, we have Dave Ansbacher. Before I go into my slides, I just want to say hello to my friends from DOT and State Highway and let you know that we are communicating and collaborating more than ever lately. We work on a lot of things together. So to Chris Conklin and Hannah Henn from DOT and Derek Gunn from State Highway spent a lot of time at my office over the last few years. It's great to be doing these good things in partnership with one another. So this picture I have a very picture-heavy presentation for you today. So I'll just blast through a lot of the slides that have photos. This is Beach. I took most of these photos myself. I've spent a lot of time on the parkways, not only because I enjoy them, but I just want to observe what's going on. And this is very typical of the scene you see. It's people of all ages and abilities doing different things. There's joggers, there's bicyclists, there's a lot of families with strollers, and you'll see this throughout the picture that you have tremendous diversity of users in terms of age, ability, race, ethnicity, all across the board. And I hope I can advance my slides. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you briefly today is the purpose of the open parkways, the timelines, some of the adaptations we've had to make, and some of the counts. This particular photo you're looking at here today is from Little Falls Parkway, and I think in April. So the purpose of the open parkways is to provide a safe space for people to get out and exercise that enables social distancing. The Sligo and Beach are each 22 feet wide. And then, as you know, portions of Little Falls are 2 lanes each way, so about double that. And it relieves crowding on our most popular trails that run parallel to the parkways, the CCT at Little Falls, and of course Sligo, and then Rock Creek along Beach Drive. This picture here is Sligo Creek Parkway in the southern section down by Tacoma Park. Please don't hurt your brain trying to understand what this graph on the left says. I will tell you it has, this is a user counts at the Capitol Crescent Trail at the Del Carlia Reservoir, symbolized by those yellow bars. The red bar up top is the temperature, which obviously can affect utilization, and then the blue line at the bottom is rainfall, which of course can affect utilization. But this is what that green arrow shows you is in the period between February 24th and April 6th, the period where the stay-at-home orders were put in effect, that people got outside and started using the Capitol Crescent Trail very heavily. And then the chart on the right just simply shows you that during that period, there was a 40% increase during the same period over the last year at that particular point on the CCT. So you spoke about this earlier, that the government can act fast when it needs to. We're pretty proud that we acted fast for the parkways. As you know, March 5th was the announcement of the state of emergency, and then by April 17th, 6 weeks later, we had taken the historical closure that was just in the Tacoma Park portion of Sligo and extended it to the other parkways. These are the locations you're very familiar with. On Sligo Creek Parkway, we have two sections that total 2.6 miles. To the south in Tacoma Park, we have Old Carroll to Piney Branch. And then to the north up towards Wheaton, we have Forest Glen to University. And then Beach Drive, Connecticut to Knowles is 2.7 miles. And then Little Falls from Massachusetts Ave to Arlington. So this is just some adjustments we made since we started the program. Whenever you do something quick, you've got to keep assessing it and seeing how it's working or not. So we did that. In April, we installed more automated counters. I'll show you where they are in a future slide. In May, we got the idea of educating the users by putting social distancing extensions on the pavement. I'll show you some of those. In June, we completed our gate modifications. I'll talk to you about that in a future slide. And then July, we started doing some programming, and that's one of the points I want to make. When you see these pictures, it's obvious we have walkers, joggers, strollers, bikers, but we see an opportunity on these open parkways for events, for more different type of community building events. September at Little Falls, we made a modification to change the closure from Friday to Sunday to Saturday, Sunday for the Washington Episcopal School convenience for programs they were running. An event in October called Halloween Chalk and Walk, I'll show you. And then we added extensions for holidays, and we plan to continue doing that through the winter month holidays on the parkways as well, which we'll of course announce in advance. This just shows where the counters are. There's two on each of the parkways, Little Falls Beach and Sligo. In addition, there are counters on the adjoining trails, but these are the counters we installed on the parkways. Here's an example of the stencils we painted on the ground throughout the three parkways. And this is a gate down on the lower part of Sligo before it was retrofitted. It shows you that the gates were put on the parkways to keep cars out, not to let people through. So fortunately, we have excellent in-house tradespeople and welders and carpenters who could come in and swoop in and retrofit the gates. This is an example of what we did here, where the gates are now pinned down into the roadway and allow people to pass through the center. We did incur significant labor and cost for this, which we submitted for CARES reimbursement. Here's an example of an event I talked about. This was the Kennebec Chalk Challenge. Here's the Halloween walk and chalk we did in partnership with the city of Tacoma Park, Halloween. And then as Chair Anderson, Little Falls Parkway, we know we have a lot of unhappy people out there about this, but I have a labor-intensive operation. At the same time, I have a labor shortage in the Parks Department, a very significant labor shortage. So we did announce that we are going to suspend Little Falls for the winter months and monitor it as things go forward. Just some quick counts. You might not know it, but that a wooden post in the middle holds a counter. Here's Beach Drive at Wildwood. Shows that I'm not going to read the numbers to you because the photo collage here is blocking them, but you can see them hopefully. Little Falls Parkway at Bethesda Pool. Month by month. Sligo Creek Parkway in the southern section. You can see May was the peak month. And in the north section as well, May was the peak month. And that is the new section that that was opened up in addition to the southern section. So our conclusions so far is that we believe it's been a very successful response to the pandemic. It demonstrated our ability to act quickly and adapt, revealed widespread support for the open parkways concept, and it created a new type of space for family exercise and recreation. I want to emphasize that. That's one of my observations, is we have created a type of space that was needed that didn't exist, where families with little children feel very comfortable being and other uses. So this is really a space we're providing our community members that was not available to them before to do different things. So now I'm going to zap through some photos. This one is for Chair Anderson and Councilmember Reamer, who are mountain bikers. Here's the big fat tire. So we got a happy future mountain biker here. I don't think Dad was too happy I was snapping a photo, so I did make a speedy getaway. Here's again some more future mountain bikers. Tires aren't quite as fat, but it looks like a dad out maybe with his kids. Here's a rollerblader. I've seen a lot of rollerbladers. This one's taking her mask very seriously. And one of the observations I make of the families with little kids, it's a place where mom and dad are comfortable letting the kids get a little bit of a distance away. Maybe that's when I say it's a new space that didn't exist. You let your kid get 20 feet ahead of you and you don't have to be worried about anything. A couple little girls out for a bike ride on Beach Drive. Again, looks like a father and son in scooters. Tons of strollers. Lots of people out there with their babies pushing baby strollers. And that's it. I've used the word magical to describe the open parkways. This is my proof. I was out at Connecticut and Beach, and I looked around and was able to snap a photo of this little girl riding with her unicorn strapped to her back. So there's the evidence that this is a magical experience. That's it for me, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Love it. Thank you. I know this has been one of the most appreciated changes that the county made in the moment. I think, as you said, providing a whole new kind of space that really didn't exist before, or existed only intermittently, depending on where you are. That's terrific. Does that conclude your presentation? I'm sure there'll be a good conversation.
Yes, it does.
All right. Well, so I know I'll be speaking with the concurrence of my colleagues and many people when I say we want to know how you can get Little Falls and any of these closures, back to being closed. I think that I've heard very little concern about them. I think people have come to see the value, and if they have to work around the closed road a little bit, they understand that that they're also benefiting from that closure, and they're able to use it. And so, it's not a zero-sum game here. It's a little bit something that people are willing to do. So, whatever we can do to get them back to being closed, which is a funny phrase to say. I'm used to saying get them back open in this COVID moment, but get them back to closed, I think would be really appreciated. And you can certainly let us know if there's some kind of barrier that the county council could help with. But across the board, I think, Beach, Sligo, Little Falls, they've been really, really well received.
Chair Reamer, if I might say something, I apologize. Councilmember Friesen, you can go first, and then I'll follow up behind that.
I was waiting for Councilmember Friesen to signal his interest to comment.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll be brief. I mean, first of all, I've utilized all three of these quite a bit, Beach Drive and Little Falls Parkway in particular, but also Sligo Creek. In fact, I've been both walking and bike riding on Sligo Creek. And they're popular, but not too popular. I mean, they're safe. They're able to be used in a way, unlike Capitol Crescent Trail and the C&O Canal towpath and some of the other really popular places where it doesn't feel as safe sometimes at the most popular hours because of social distancing. And this has provided an escape valve to some of our most popular trails, which has been really helpful. I wanted to get a sense in terms of Little Falls Parkway, just dovetailing off of what Chair Reamer was saying. What does that mean? Like, what does the winter mean? Keeping an eye on it. What does that mean? Is there a timeline? We've heard a lot from residents asking about this, and when it will be reopened, focused on pedestrians and bicyclists, or closed to vehicular traffic, depending on how you want to refer to it. But what's the thought process? What's the timing, and what can we tell residents when they reach out to ask us about how this is going to proceed?
Sure. I just want to clarify why Little Falls closure and opening is more labor intensive. Beach and Sligo, for the most part, have gates. And the reason for that is Beach and Sligo historically have flooded more frequently than Little Falls. So we regularly, for flooding purposes, when the road was unsafe, would have to close those. Little Falls does not have gates, plus, as you know, the section from River up towards Arlington is 2 lanes each way, so it's wider. And there's 10 spots where we have to load barrels onto trucks. A crew of 8, joined by Park Police, has to go to those 10 locations, set up the barrels, and then when the parkway reopens to vehicles, of course, remove the barricades, and that's on Sundays. That's overtime pay. So, this was a hard decision to make. As I said, the problem was I have a labor shortage at a time I have a new labor intensive operation, at a time I have a 6% savings plan, and we've given people a lot of COVID leave to take off. So I really am down in my maintenance and our operations depot just to keep up with our day-to-day work. So, our thought was keep 2 of the 3 open for the winter months. Of course, the other variable I can't predict is the weather. Last weekend was cold and windy. This weekend is going to be sunny and 60. I know our winters are getting warmer, but I do anticipate overall that utilization will be down in the winter months. So we're going to continue to evaluate. One of the things we'll monitor carefully is the utilization of the Capitol Crescent Trail. We have counters on the CCT. That, of course, is an option for people, but if it gets too crowded, that could be a factor that makes us relook at this. But what I have said publicly is we will continue to reassess this on a regular basis over the winter months and see when it is that we can reopen it, either in the late winter or early spring, when the weather is expected to improve. As you saw from that graph I showed last year, the utilization really spiked between the end of February and the beginning of April. On the CCT, on the Capitol Crescent Trail.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Just please keep us informed on that. If there are factors that are changing, even while you're reviewing it, if it's a decision point, a discussion point, it would just be helpful for us to know the status of that. Obviously, my office in particular, but all of our offices, get quite a bit of interest and constituent questions about this. So it'd be helpful to be apprised as to where things are. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just put a little bit finer point on this, everything Mike said is absolutely right, but it's also important to understand we do have some logistical challenges. We can work those out. We are going to work those out. We could get this done sooner rather than later. There is going to be a cost impact to that. In particular, there's some gates that we would need to install in Little Falls, which, you know, are basically 4-lane wide at, I think, 4 different points. So that's not an astronomical amount of money, but it's not money that's in our budget. And so we want to work with you, and we'll absolutely be interested in trying to do that sooner rather than later.
Good. Okay, Evan.
Yeah, just real quick. I appreciate the comments by you, Chair Reamer, and Councilmember Friedson regarding Little Falls. Want to just echo and second those comments and concerns, because I've been receiving constituent queries as well. So I appreciate you, Chair Anderson, and Director Riley for explaining the situation to us today, and saying that it is not done, that you are keeping the door open to changing this in the future. So I appreciate that. And then just, I just want to commend you all for doing something so quickly and nimbly that constituents love. And it's been said by my colleagues, and so I don't need to go on, but thank you very much. I know nearly everybody whom I speak to and contacts me really appreciates it.
Cool. Darren, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I appreciate, I think Mike and Casey did a really good job of summarizing. I think I'll just say that kind of in response to some of the initial comments about the open streets in total, is we do see this as a shift in the way we think about our parkways and think about our parks and our infrastructure. And every decision that we've been making has been with an eye towards the long-term shift and the long-term open parkways, and trying to continue to make sure that that we bend at times with the program, but we never break. So we keep our staff morale up, and we keep everybody engaged and committed to the program from the top all the way through to our frontline staff, who I think, as I've talked about this program a lot, I've talked a lot about the teamwork and how it's been, all facets of the Parks Department and MCDOT and other partners. I've probably not talked as much as I should have about our operations staff, who are juggling 1,000 things and going to work every single day when the shift allows them to, in a time that over the past year has been really, challenging and scary. And I think just want to take this opportunity to thank them for constantly being upbeat and positive about this program, and juggling things as necessary and taking on more as necessary. And those are the folks that we're really trying to give a little bit of a breather to. I know it's a tough time because of winter. I totally appreciate that folks want to continue to use the parkway. But again, what I'm thinking towards is what are the things that we can do now to make sure that we can keep this going in the long term.
Good. All right.
Mr.
Taylor.
So not a counterpoint, but just want to make sure that everybody is apprised of and reminded, because I've shared some of this with Darren, and also reached out to Andy Frank to talk about the impacts of the Little Falls Parkway closure on one of the neighboring communities, Kenwood, and I had an opportunity to meet out in the field with a staff member with 12 to 15 folk who live in the Kenwood community that have been concerned about the redirected traffic associated with Little Falls Parkway closure and how that's impacting their neighborhood and their livelihood. And had the opportunity to see firsthand what they were talking about, a lot of transient traffic, not knowing where they're going the wrong way on one-way streets, driving at exorbitant speeds. And so the DOT is seeking to work with the community to find some traffic calming methodology to help assuage some of those traffic impacts. But the number one way to do that is not to have that transient traffic go through the neighborhood. And so I'm not belittling, saying it shouldn't happen, the Little Falls Parkway closure, but I did want to open up a dialogue, and I have already started doing that, but a dialogue with Parks to try to talk about some of the things that we might be able to do so that the people in that community don't feel so strongly impacted. Standing in the street with folk who are saying, I'm moving because of this, and there's a for sale sign in their yard, so I know they're not just blowing smoke. and wanting to make sure that Montgomery County residents recognize that they're served by all the modes and all the agencies in the county. I just, that's something that I believe that we just need to do to see how we can, pare down those impacts. So I just wanted to make sure we were aware of that, because I'm sure this crosstalk is going to come up in the near future.
That's a good point. So you're in dialogue with Parks and you're working collaboratively. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, water flows downhill and it always finds a way, right? And
yes, sir.
The same. And so, you do have to understand, like, we're fortunate now. There's just fewer trips, I think. So there's not as much of an impact, but it needs to be managed all the same. All right. Well, thanks for that. All right, Mr. Co-Chair, I think we're all wrapped up.
I absolutely think we're all wrapped up. Thank you all for all your hard work. Mr. Bogus, thanks for hanging in there with us. We really appreciate all your hard work and that of Parks and DOT as well. And I think we're just scratching the surface of all the improvements we can make here. So I'm really excited about what the future holds.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for everyone's
Thanks,
great work.
everybody.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Hannah.
The emergency. Passengers are now required to board at the rear